Welcome, everybody. I am thrilled that you all seem to know each other and have so much to say to each other. It's very exciting. This is a community-organized event, but let me begin by welcoming everybody. My name is Michael Mark Cohen, and I am a professor of American Studies and African American Studies at UC Berkeley, and I'm the director. Those are my colleagues in the back. I brought my own audience. But we are immensely proud collectively to sponsor an organization we call the Band Scholars Project, of which I am one of the co-directors. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's public convening about defending public education in California. Now, just speaking for myself here, this is a deeply gratifying event to see you all here, not only because I've always considered myself a public school teacher, and I am the son of two public school teachers, but I'm also a proud parent of two Malcolm X and Berkeley High School graduates, and I'm a citizen of the city of Berkeley. So I want to thank you all, not only just for being here today, but for all that you do in the community to make the East Bay such a special place to live, work, and to learn. For generations, the state of California has been justifiably proud of its public schools. We here in Berkeley can be especially proud, both as the inheritors of the first public school system in the United States to voluntarily desegregate and the home of one of the nation's greatest public universities. But though we inhabit the same city and share the same public mandate, rarely did these two vital public institutions collaborate and seek to address our common challenges and shared visions for public education from kindergarten through the PhD. Yet at this moment, we are all united by the same attack. Elementary schools and public universities alike are threatened by a radical right wing that is openly hostile not just to public schools, but to the very idea of an educated public. This attack seeks to exploit educational efforts at diversity and inclusion, something that defines the strength of our community, as a wedge issue to censor our teachers, intimidate our students, and to silence any meaningful critical voices. What began as a conservative attack on DEI and critical race theory and gender ideology and the like has now become an all-out assault directed by the federal government. Indeed, at this moment, both UC Berkeley and BUSD are facing federal investigations for what the administration claims is anti-Semitism. We both face challenges to our ethnic studies and African American studies curricula and the common collapse of federal funding for education across the board. Just as Superintendent Ford Morthel was called before a federal investigation where she performed admirably, I would like to add. Yeah, thank you for that. You were great. We're all big fans, apparently. I will add that the UC Berkeley Chancellor Lyons is expected to face a similar grilling before the same committee, although we don't have the same expectations of success. So now that we are truly in the same boat between UC Berkeley and BUSD, what is to be done? We at the Band Scholars Project at UC Berkeley, together with our community partners at Berkeley High School's African American Studies program, working with grants from the Mellon Foundation and Spencer Foundations, believe that it is to be part of public education must be to defend public education, and that it is our common responsibility to advocate for our students, to defend the diversity of our faculty and staff, and to stand for the greater good embodied in African American studies, ethnic studies, and public education in general. Now, the Band Scholars Project began as a project to learn from scholars who were fighting academic censorship, teaching Black women's literature in Florida, or professors building freedom schools in Philadelphia, or professors who've been removed from classrooms in New England for teaching about Palestine. And now, for our last major event, we, with the Band Scholars Project, have come back home, once perhaps imagined as a refuge, but now known as a battleground itself, in an attempt to push back against these divisive, racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic state and now federal policies with the strongest weapon available to us as scholars and teachers, namely solidarity. So, thank you. All right, so let me offer a few thank yous, and I will introduce our moderator and I will get out of the way. First of all, I want to thank the Department of African American Studies, my colleagues in the back there. Thank you all. Particularly helmed by our chair, Professor Eula Taylor, with incredible staff support from Sandy Richmond, Lindsay Villarreal, and Maria Herrera. I want to thank the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and Spencer Foundations for providing all of their financial support. We want to thank our partners here at Berkeley High School, in particular Spencer Pritchett and Dawn Williams. We want to thank the Berkeley AV for recording this program, especially Justin Wu, who's in the back, is working the big board. We want to thank our panelists for being here, but you'll have ample opportunity to thank them. And most importantly, I want to thank the indomitable organizing talents of Barbara Montano, without whom none of this would actually be happening. So let me just introduce tonight's moderator, and that is Travis Bristol. He's on the far end there. Travis Bristol is an ideal figure to moderate today's discussion, and I want to thank him for his time and energy. Dr. Bristol is a former student and teacher in the New York City public schools and a teacher educator with the Boston Teacher Residency Program. Since then, he has attained tremendous and ongoing success as an academic in the field of education. And he is today an associate professor at Berkeley School of Education and African American Studies, where he specializes in teacher education and education policy. He's the faculty director of the Center for Research on Expanding Educational Opportunities, and he is the recent recipient of the UC Berkeley's Chancellor Award for Public Service and Community Engaged Teaching. So he is our moderator. Thank you all, and I look forward to the event.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening. Good evening. So we are here today to talk about how to resist, how to engage in conversations about the ongoing attacks to public education that in many ways undermine the promise of America and the American project. That is the task. That's the assignment. And we will get there. We will get there. We will talk, I think, with this panel and with the panelists here about the wickedness and the evil coming out of Washington, D.C., because that was part of the assignment. And as I do that, I'd like to invite us to hold the both and, particularly as we sit here in this bastion of liberalism here in Berkeley and the Berkeley Unified School District. I am a former parent in this district. And the last time I got invited to engage with the district 5 years ago, haven't been invited since, because I'll say what I'm about to say. So I want us to be able to hold the both and. We'll get to DC, but I think it's important to start locally before we can engage in a national conversation. One of the greatest gifts to my Black daughter, my baby, during the COVID-19 pandemic was when we moved to remote learning. Because what that meant for me and for my partner was that we did not have to send our Black daughter to sit in an elementary school with a teacher for 6 hours a day who did not have the capacity to love or much less like Black children. COVID was hard. Michael mentioned I'm from New York, so I lost family members, right? COVID was a hard time. And for our Black family, not having to send our Black daughter to school was a gift. And so as we spend time this evening, I think, talking about and engaging with how to resist the ongoing attacks to public education that undermine the promise of America and the project of America, it's also, I think, important to hold the both and, that as the work, Pedro Nogueira, who was on the faculty at UC Berkeley in the early 20s, in the early 2000s, in his text, The American Dream, City Schools and the American Dream, he documented how locally in this district, particularly Black and Latinx children, that they did not have the opportunity to experience the promise of America. And so I want us just to hold the both and, that we'll spend some time engaging with DC, but we can't, it would be problematic for us not to sit with what is locally, because there are some things that we can't control nationally, but I think there are some things that we can control locally. To date, the President of the United States has signed about 140 executive orders, roughly 141 for those who are counting. And these orders, they undermine this American project. And I think part of the American project is centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The invitation is to, glad we're here, is to spell out, not DEI, but to say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because the American project is about diversity, equity, inclusion. Our nation's motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one, that sacred pledge, right? Liberty and justice for all. That anthem, land of the free. The work of this president in many ways undermines the promise and the project of America. For example, Executive Order 14190, which ends racial, quote unquote, racial and radical indoctrination in K-12 schools, prohibits K-12 schools from teaching content believed to be, quote unquote, anti-American. Executive Order 14242, improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities. It ensures that federal funds are not used to support programs labeled as, quote unquote, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know from history that fascists dictate what can or cannot be taught in schools. Teachers who know their content and their students should be allowed, right, to teach and should be able to teach their content that will prepare their students to live and thrive in a global community. And so the conversation that we're engaged in today is in many ways a way to think about the impact of these current attacks at the national level and how it's impacting individuals locally. And so to engage in this conversation about defending public education here in California, we are joined by 6 esteemed panelists. And so I'll read their bios, and then we'll jump into questions. I'll ask them a couple of questions, and then we'll turn it over to you at roughly around 7:30. Barbara, is that correct? Where's Barbara? Okay. So our first panelist, Superintendent Enikia Morthel, is an urban educator and a community activist with over 24 years as an educator here in California. She has facilitated the turnaround of quote-unquote underperforming schools and an incubation of new schools in some of the Bay Area's highest needs communities. In her 3rd year as a superintendent of BUSD, Superintendent Morthel has led the district's focus on instructional coherence and advanced the district's efforts towards excellence, equity, enrichment, and engagement. Superintendent Morthel has also served as the San Francisco Unified's deputy superintendent and assistant superintendent, and she has been the chief of schools in Oakland, a principal of a number of Bay Area school districts, an instructional coach, and an elementary school teacher. Next to Superintendent Morthel is Joami Ito Gates. The pronouns are she and her. She is a mother and an ethnic studies educator here in the district, which is in the district, as she notes, sits on unceded and Ohlone land, where she has taught for over 20 years. She's also engaged in community organizing and works in the Japanese American community. She's a practicing Buddhist and is the co-superintendent of the Buddhist Church of Oakland's Dharma School. Next to Joami is Spencer. Spencer's currently a teacher. Is that right? Yeah, Spencer's currently a teacher and a co-chair of the African American Studies Department at Berkeley High School. He teaches various social science courses within the department, African American history, Black economics, Black psychology, and more. As co-chair, he hosts numerous programs such as the Black Scholar Center and Black Graduation. He advises the campus's Black Student Union, which works to build Black teacher leadership and community across campuses. He has a BA from Berkeley and his teaching credential from SF State, and Spencer is also pursuing national board certification with us over at Berkeley. Next to Spencer is Keith Brown. Keith Brown is the executive secretary and treasurer of the Alameda Labor Council, AFL-CIO. Keith is an Oakland native, and he's worked for 22 years as a teacher in the Oakland Unified School District. Previously, he served as president of the Oakland Education Association, which is the local labor union. Under Keith's leadership, OEA teachers won major gains during a historic 7-day strike in February 2019, where tens of thousands of Oaklanders of all ages joined teachers on picket lines and at mass rallies and actions to fight for the future of public schools in the district. As president of OEA, Keith worked in collaboration with labor and community to elect new school board members to stop a plan to close 6 neighborhood schools with predominantly Black student population. Next to Spencer is Skylar Barton. Skylar Barton is a native of Berkeley, California, and has remained a lifelong community member of the East Bay. Barton earned a BA in Asian American Studies from SF State, as well as a master's in counseling, where he was awarded the Peggy H. Smith Outstanding Graduate Student Award. Forever a coach at heart, Barton has served as an educator in Berkeley for more than 2 decades, first as a middle school athletic director and then as a college counselor at his alma mater here, Berkeley High School, before transitioning to Berkeley City College in 2015. In 2011, he was presented with a proclamation from the City of Berkeley's Office of the Mayor, declaring June 15th, 2011, Skylar Barton Day. In recognition of his commitment to supporting youth and members of the Berkeley community. And last but not least is Jen Corin. Jen is a lifelong educator and a BUSD parent with deep connections to Berkeley Public Schools. She's served as a Spanish bilingual teacher, elementary principal, and after-school program coordinator in Berkeley and Oakland Public Schools, and is currently the director of school improvement for Oakland Unified. She was elected to the Berkeley School Board in November 2014. She holds a BA in Educational Studies from, 2024. Holds a BA in Educational Studies from Brown, a master's from Mills, and a master's in Educational Administration from UC Berkeley. So we are joined here by an esteemed panel, and we'll jump right in. So the first question to Superintendent Ford Morthel, having been invited or summoned to Congress and having faced down unjustified accusations leveled against you in the past, the question is, what did you learn from that experience? And how has that experience informed your current work leading this school district?
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you corrected. That was not an imitation. It was kind of written as such, but it was very clearly not. When I said, "Can I not go? Can I send someone else in my place?" So it was not an invitation. It was definitely a summons. What did I learn? I don't know that I learned a lot. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that my village is formidable and ready to get into formation on my behalf or on behalf of causes that really are important to us. But other than that, I think it was more of a reminder. I didn't learn anything new. I was reminded of something that I say and have said in many places and spaces, and that is that this institution of public education, my opinion, was never intended to do what we're trying to do here in Berkeley. Was never intended to serve and make sure that every baby, regardless of what they look like, what they sound like, where they come from, is able to be their full selves and thrive. And why that's important to me is because I knew that before Congress. I knew that 20 plus years ago when I went into education. That's why I went into education, because I'm very clear that I'm in a system that's stubborn and persistent and does not want to do what I think I and those of us in this room know needs to be done. So every morning when I get up, I know that I'm coming to do what Berkeley says we're trying to do. And you're right, we'll talk about their Black baby later. Enable and inspire our diverse student body to achieve academic excellence and make positive contributions to the world. That is a mouthful, but I know every morning I get up to do that work, that is a form of intentional resistance. And that if we pull it off, it's revolutionary. So I was sitting there in Congress, aware of all that, but being very clearly reminded that is true. That's not just something that I think or something that is in the back of my head. It's real. And that there's a whole government. There's a whole lot of people, and they don't all look alike, by the way. Some of them look like me. There's a whole lot of people that are intent that we do not realize that goal. There's a whole lot of folks who are scared of what might happen if we did realize the goal of making sure that every single student got to be their full selves and got to realize all of their inherent brilliance and potential. So how did that influence and inform what I did next? It just meant that I doubled down. It just meant that when we got back to Berkeley, I was like, oh, y'all, they're scared, right? And if folks are scared, that means that there's something powerful in whatever it is that you're doing. They're scared of what we teach and how we teach it, to the point that I'm in DC and folks are asking me questions about a specific slide from a slideshow that they know nothing about. It wasn't about the context. They didn't ask me any questions about what was being said when that slide was being delivered. They didn't ask me for the background and the pre-lessons and how the students were engaged. It was, let me pull this slide. This slide says X, doesn't it mean X? What I did learn, perhaps, is that we got to really move fast, because the level of ignorance that is pervasive in our world is dangerous. Our inability to think critically, to ask questions and be curious is scary. No one asked me a question. They had lots of questions, actually, but they already knew the answer. And so I came back to Berkeley to keep doing what we're trying to do, to make sure that our babies are given space to truly be critical thinkers, to not tell them what to think, but how to think, to make sure that our babies are able to be into spaces where they are across and with difference and actually understand that that's okay. You're going to be uncomfortable sometimes. To learn to listen and hear about other people's experiences. Ethnic studies, oh, we're not going to just do it at high school. We're going to do it from PK all the way to 12 now. We was doing it before, right, Joemi? But now we're really going to do it. I think it also fortified my belief that community engagement is important. I did wonder and think about whose voices were being heard in that moment, whose voices and whose stories and experiences got me called to Congress. Quite honestly, I did wonder why I wasn't called earlier, talking about your Black baby. There's a whole bunch of babies who have experienced discrimination, who've experienced hate, who've experienced uncomfortableness, who've experienced just the system not doing right and well by them, and nobody called me for them. The kids can't read. The opportunity gap, the achievement gap is wide and is getting wider, but nobody called me for that. So I did feel this just like discomfort of like, I need to know whose stories are being told and whose stories are being elevated. I want to talk about everybody's stories. And so when I got back to Berkeley, I said, we need to make sure the stories are being heard from folks who are not always heard from, and that folks have information that they need and are ready to really be thoughtfully and truly engaged. So didn't learn a lot. Some things were reaffirmed for me, and all it did is make me come on home and say, y'all, we got to keep doing what we're doing and do it more and do it better and maybe even do it differently towards the end of making sure that all of our students truly are seen, heard, valued, and realize their full potential in our public system.
Thank you, Superintendent. You talked a bit about threats, and so Joemi, I'm wondering if you can pick up on this idea of threats. What are the threats to ethnic studies education at the district level? That's the first question. And then the second question is, how are our teachers, how have they been handling the backlash to an ethnic studies education or curriculum?
Yeah, thank you. So tonight, I want to talk about courage, and I want to talk about love. Too often, opponents of ethnic studies lodge false claims of divisiveness and anti-Semitism. Ethnic studies is neither of these things, full stop. Ethnic studies was born out of collective courage, rooted in community love and solidarity. For those who don't know, I think it's important to name that Berkeley Unified established an African American Studies department here at Berkeley High in 1968 because of the courage and love of African American students, families, staff, and community members who wanted an education that was truly reflective of their rich history and lived experiences. This was the same year that student strikes for ethnic studies were taking place at SF State and UC Berkeley. In 1990, it was with courage and love that a diverse group of students advocated for the establishment of a required ethnic studies class for ninth graders, which we still have in place to this day. It was not easy then, and it certainly is not easy now, because there have always been threats to ethnic studies education. So the threats here are the same as the threats everywhere. Opponents to ethnic studies want us to be silent. We see the same kinds of tactics being used across the nation, such as Public Records Act requests, which take time away from the real work of educators, false accusations, complaints, as well as lawsuits against individual teachers and districts at large, targeting of individual teachers to make an example of and scare other educators into submission. They want to whitewash ethnic studies, and they want to weaponize certain words and erase certain histories so that we will lose courage. Because they know that telling our stories, teaching our true histories, and centering humanizing practices in our classrooms is building community power and the capacity to do what Robin D.G. Kelley and Dr. Bettina Love call freedom dreaming. So I want to quote Dr. Bettina Love. She says, "Freedom dreaming is imagining worlds that are just, representing people's full humanity, centering people left on the edges. Thriving in solidarity with folks from different identities who have struggled together for justice, and knowing that dreams are just around the corner with the might of people power." So opponents of ethnic studies don't want us to freedom dream. They want us to be trapped in a nightmare of their own making, so we will become immobilized. And here in Berkeley, we're not going to do that. I think it's also important to invoke the fact that our schools reside in the city that is the birthplace of free speech and the fight for academic freedom. So when we have some of our skillful and thoughtful teachers who, even in spite of being scared, and some of them are very scared, have still taken the brave step of teaching about topics such as Palestine, LGBTQ plus history, and other topics that are deemed, quote, controversial, they are uplifting this long-standing city legacy. I've witnessed many of our educators meeting the backlash to ethnic studies with fortitude and with the knowledge that if we succumb to silence and erase whole peoples and whole histories, it doesn't end. So our community, our schools are not perfect. However, I am proud to say, as a colleague and especially as a mother to a third grader in this district, that many of our teachers have a deep conviction about the need for and importance of ethnic studies in our schools, because many of our teachers have a deep love for our children and for doing what's best for them. And having an education that includes ethnic studies is truly what's best for our children. And I would argue that it is the birthright of all of our children to have this kind of education.
I appreciate you underscoring this idea that having an ethnic studies education is what's good for all children. Spencer, I'm wondering if you could pick up on that where Joemi left off. If you could talk about some of the challenges that you are facing as an educator, as someone who teaches African American studies, how have teachers been handling this sort of backlash in the classroom?
For me, I'm lucky and I'm very privileged because, unlike other educators, I don't have to worry about whether or not I'll have an assignment next year. I'll be able to plan for the classes I'm teaching. I have a vice principal and I have district leadership who are supportive, who have told me we'll take a funding hit if it means we continue African American studies. And we have a deep legacy here within our department, within Berkeley, of having African American studies and being celebrated. At the same time, or given that, the issues for me in the African American Studies department are what they've always been, it's structure of the educational system. And so I recognize that privilege of we have cover, we have barriers to the backlash, and it's hard to just do the job every single day. And I think that's for me in this moment, the deepest issue is I have students that come to class, they can't think, they're so hungry, they just took a long BART ride to get there, they moved, they kicked out their house, they're too tired, they're over it, they hate being here. They love what they're learning when they're able to engage with it, but it's incredibly hard. And so for me, it's then the structure of school has to change, has to transform in order to actually meet students where they're at and actually address those real needs before they're able to fully be themselves, to fully actualize themselves in the classroom and see school as a site of liberation, not control. And so for me, am I a liberator or am I acting closer to like an overseer in the classroom? Am I telling students to do work for the sake of the task, or am I actually helping them realize who they are, or at least asking questions that make them think and pushing them to truly grow? We are in a funding deficit right now. We're in budget cuts, not just Berkeley, across the country. And we didn't have nearly enough of a budget before. AFM Studies, we only recently have had some money to host the Black Scholar Center. This is, I believe, our third year, whereas this teacher, I'm able to have time, structured time, to host events for Black students, to do different community-based organizing for students and with students to help them grow and learn and also transform themselves just beyond the school. And how do I bring the community as a side of learning, not just the school as well? So those are the thoughts in my head, and my that at a site level, at a very much a classroom level, is what's going on, at least for me. For my colleagues, though, there's other teachers I have held their tears when they don't know if they're coming back. And like that's such a deeper issue. It's like no one's like pinpointing them, it's just a structural thing. And so it's tough because I've already been deeply struggling with this work on the ground, and then boom, we have attacks from the White House. We have cuts. It's like I've already been struggling my entire 8 years as an educator doing this work, and it's not, there's no like, it doesn't feel like there's more light. It just feels like it's getting darker at the structural level. Now the students are clearly what keeps me engaged, what keeps me going, but that's kind of what we've been experiencing here at Berkeley High AFAM Studies Department.
I appreciate the opportunity to sort of think about what's happening in classrooms, but also to think about what's happening structurally, right? That there are these structures that are constraining or making it challenging for you to do what you're doing. Keith, I'm wondering if you could maybe pick up on this idea of structure, given where you sit in terms of the labor community. How do you see the role of labor in defending public education?
Thank you. When you look at public education and public schools, our public school system, it should be a cornerstone of democracy. And labor unions, workers, the labor movement, we must do everything that we can to defend public education, to defend our public schools. Not just teachers unions, not just education unions, but the labor movement. When you look at our public schools, and during the pandemic, it was really clear what our schools mean to the community as far as being a center for education, providing services for our families. You look at, there's, the model of community schools. I come from Oakland Unified School District, the community schools and this was something that started with the Black Panthers of schools providing clinics and providing nourishment for students. So this is public schools is an institution that must be protected. And then when we see the attacks against public education coming from the Trump administration, what is happening is we are seeing the billionaire class defunding education and doing everything they can, and especially you look at schools serving students of color, doing everything they can not to provide resources for critical thinking as far as our public schools. We should be able to have in our schools discourse as far as teaching our students about civic engagement, supporting our students to be critical thinkers and to be involved in civic activities. So when you defund public education, you're defunding opportunities for our students to become civically engaged, and that's the billionaire agenda. So if you have, and the thing is, if you have well-educated, informed students of color. Then we have the billionaire agenda is, okay, we're going to take away voting rights, and that's the connection with democracy. So as labor unions, labor unions are democratic institutions. My role, Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Alameda Labor Council, representing 135 unions across Alameda County. This is a democratically elected position. Unions are democratic organizations that have a base, and it is the labor movement must be active and must play a role in defending public education, protecting our schools, and also supporting our students. And also one thing that I would like to see also is as far as workers having more of a role in visiting our schools, becoming guest speakers in our classrooms. We last year, the California legislature passed AB 800, Workforce Readiness Week, to provide resources for our students to learn about workers' rights, to learn about how to form unions, and especially for our young workers just now finding jobs, to know about their rights. And I see, as far as opportunities for workers of color coming into our schools and sharing their experiences with our students. But I think it is just very important as a labor movement that we defend public education, because it is the cornerstone of democracy. And then we heard the speakers talk about ethnic studies, and in San Francisco State, it took a student strike of, I believe, 167 days to win ethnic studies, and that was the work of students working with faculty and community. And at that time, the labor movement as a whole was not supportive of movements such as ethnic studies. Labor, looking at the AFL-CIO, focused on bread and butter issues, just wages. But as a labor movement, we must go beyond that. We must also defend our immigrant families, our immigrant workers. And when you look at what's happening in education, where in Oakland and Chicago and Los Angeles, bargaining for the common good, going beyond just the bread and butter issues, but also listening to the community and taking on issues and taking on things such as addressing the needs for housing for our unhoused youth and families. So as a labor movement, we have to go beyond the bread and butter issues and also support our communities. So it is vital that in this new age of Trump, that as unions, as a democratic institution, protect and defend public education, and to make sure that it's a true vehicle that promotes democracy and civic engagement for our students.
Thinking about students, we've been talking up until this point about K-12 schools. So Skylar, I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about about what's happening at the community college level at this moment. Given that the UC system takes in thousands of transfer students a year, how are the attacks on higher education impacting your work?
Thank you. Good evening. I've been waiting patiently over here. You know, it's my turn. I'll tell you, Superintendent, you got me amped. When you said double down, I ditched my notes because I was like, I got to come from the heart now. So if y'all know me, you'll be like, oh, shit, what he's about to say now? I want to focus.
But then he tried to steal my notes.
I did. You got a whole lot of notes over here. I'm like, what do you got over there? So I'm gonna speak to the areas I feel are of utmost importance when we're talking about California community colleges, the spaces where I feel I'm an expert in. I'm gonna start with what's right in front of me, community, right? Centrally placed in the title, California community colleges. See, community to me is at the foundational core, right, of providing the optimal student experience. And it's of the utmost importance to focus on community first. When I talk about community, I'm talking about spaces within the academic environment that provide students with a sense of connectedness, belonging, right, a sense of comfort, which leads to confidence, opens up doors for trust, right? Therefore, we're able to dive in and show some love. This was an intentional wardrobe selection here with this heart on my shirt, right? Dare I say love? I heard it earlier in the panel as well, right? I'm talking about spaces like Umoja and Puente and other learning communities, other spaces and communities where students feel like they belong, right? In these heightened times of uncertainty, right? Students are coming through our doors. If they make it to the doors, they're coming through with a lot of question marks, right? With senses, feelings of anxiety, right? Wondering who is in this building. Is there anybody on this campus who's here with my best interest in mind? Who's there, who has my back to support me through this process? Is there a community of peers who I can lean into and they can lean into me and we can support one another through this process, right? Directly addressing these feelings of fear that many of our students are experiencing is important. So focusing on community first. And I think a lot of us in this room, including myself, can take ourselves back to our educational times, K through 12, maybe in high school, middle school, maybe in college or in a graduate program, right, where we leaned on community to support us through the process. But I'll give an example right now from just an hour ago, right? Walking through these doors, I was feeling, it wasn't a sense of anxiety or fear. Like, I love the microphone. Sometimes I feel like the microphone loves me back. Maybe it's just in my head, I don't know, right? But it wasn't that, but I'm gonna be honest, it was a feeling that I haven't felt in a long time, since graduate school, right? It was a feeling of, dare I say, imposter syndrome, right? I was coming through, and it wasn't just because of esteemed colleagues up here, but it's for all the folks in the room, right? And I had that feeling, I said, oh, what am I getting into? But then I realized, looking around this room, I realized up here, right, I know that what I bring to the table, and that's an unwavering commitment, right, to addressing opportunity gaps in our communities. I've been doing this for decades, right? And I'm gonna bring the passion, I'm gonna bring the energy, I'm gonna bring the love, right? But I look around here, I'm pretty sure y'all didn't show up here tonight because it's Saturday night, you're looking for a good time. I don't see no popcorn, I don't see no beverages over there, right? You showed up here because we share that same passion. Right, so then I know that I am in the right place. I am in my community. I am amongst community, right? And that helped push me through. So if me, a grown man, right, has those feelings, right, I feel like I have kind of made it as a professor. You heard them, they say Skylar Barton Day. You heard a shout out, right? If I have those feelings, how do you think our students are feeling, right? So bring ourselves back. Right, community is of the utmost importance. So that's one. Two, if we're going to speak to curriculum, and I know the question included the UC, attacks on UCs. We know that California community colleges are known as a great avenue, right, a vessel towards transfer into UCs, CSU, shout out SF State, and other universities as well, right? And it is a great space for that. But community colleges really represent a place for exploration, a great place to explore. Not just careers, not just what I want to be in terms of majors and careers, not just what I want to be, but who I want to be. Who do I want to be? What do I want my impact to be? So that exploration process. So I challenge us at the community college level to not think of us as grades 13 to 14 or for matriculating students out of grade 12, right? We do offer that, but we need to lean in. This is not a time to sit back and say, okay, wait for us when you graduate high school. We'll be there. It's a time to dive in. Right? Grades 9, 10, 11, 12, even 8th grade, right? Dive in and offer students with opportunities to explore curriculum, right? So they can vision their futures, because it's not a time to ask them to wait, right? So that's two, that's curriculum. Number three is just coming in with a collaborative spirit, right? Collaboration. So at the community college, wherever we're at, I'm all about collaboration. I love to see my Bridge family in here. I love to see Ben Loss back there representing SB Junior, my BUSD partners, my UC partners, my City of Berkeley partners in here, because we cannot do this type of work in isolation, right? We gotta come as a team. We gotta come as a team. These socks were also a choice. You see my Warriors socks in here. Shout out to the Warriors. Go Warriors tomorrow. So we got the community, right? We got the intentionally designed curriculum to support students wherever they're at. And I want to jump back real quick. I talked about grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 reaching in, and also making sure we keep our doors open for our returning adult scholars, right? Who see where they could have an impact in our communities, but oftentimes it takes a little bit of additional education or training so they can land those platforms that have the impact. So we need to reach in to the younger and to our adult learners as well, okay? And collaborative spirit amongst us all is where it's at. Thank you.
Scott, I appreciated this attention to intentionality. So Jen, thinking about intentionality, what kinds of conversations are happening at the school board level? How is the school board addressing this crisis, and what internal conflicts might need to be addressed to respond as a collective?
Thanks for the question, Travis. Well, first, I want to say that I'm the newest member of the school board. I was just elected in November, and after spending all this time and energy trying to figure out how to run for office, then I woke up the next day and went, holy shit, I'm an elected official in a new Trump era. I have to figure out how to protect our school district and our children from everything that's coming. And the weight of that from the moment I was elected has sat upon my shoulders. And echo what Spencer said about feeling lucky that I have found myself on a board, and one of my board colleagues is here, Mike Chang in the front row. Shout out to Mike. I have found myself on a board that is actually very united, particularly in the project of protecting our most vulnerable students. One of the first things that we did when I was elected to the board was we passed a new resolution reaffirming our protections for our undocumented students and families, and we directed the superintendent and her staff to re-engage. They probably would have done this anyway, but as a board we got to say, please go out to every school and make sure that everyone feels prepared for how to respond in this moment. If ICE shows up at their school community, or if a family encounters ICE, all of those things. So that was one of the first things that we did collectively as a board. Similarly, I don't remember when exactly, but not very long ago, we passed a new resolution reaffirming our protections for our transgender students. And in both of those cases, I think they were really important symbolic actions that we took to remind our community that our values are not changing. Enikia, our superintendent, likes to say, in Berkeley, we hold the line. And I have been quoting her on that. I think that's our job as the board, is to be courageous. And when they come for us with their ridiculous executive actions, to hold the line and to protect our community, to protect our values, to protect our kids, and to protect our families. And I don't think we have a lot of conflict about that within our board. I think we're pretty united, and I feel really lucky. I am in spaces where I'm talking to other school board members across the country who are not so lucky, who have MAGA school board colleagues who are trying to ban books that they're sitting next to on the dais. So I'm really grateful for the board that I've been elected to in Berkeley. I will say that the fiscal challenges are real, and the fiscal threats are scary. And I think we're ready to be courageous and to say we're not going to compromise on our values, and we are going to protect our kids. And if the time comes, we're already having to slash our budget. And if the time comes that federal funding is affected, that's going to be a tough challenge, and we're going to have to work our way through it together.
So Many of you, most of you, have been talking a lot about defense, and my questions were about defense. Let's think a bit about offense. Project 2025, some would argue, laid a blueprint for dismantling not only the U.S. Department of Education, but also in some ways dismantling the U.S. Social contract, right? That in exchange for some freedoms, not all freedoms, right? In exchange for some freedoms that the government provides life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So given that, I would say, I'm going to proclaim that we are in the midst of what may be the height of Trumpism, it might be helpful to think about not a Project 2025, but a Project 2029. So here's the question. If we think about offense, not defense, because I think that many of us were caught flat-footed, right? Because those who were working on Project 2025 had some time. So now, on Saturday, May 3rd, I'm going to invite each of you to think about a Project 2029. What would you like to see included in a Project 2029?
I'll start, and going back to what I was saying about the role of public education and democracy, I think our work collectively as a movement in building a Project 2029, it has to be focused on restoring faith in government's role in improving lives, because I think that when we see the billionaire agenda, they're trying to basically strip away government, but we need a bold plan that shows and demonstrate that government has a role, and that role is to improve people's lives, make lives better, and that's through funding public education, things such as universal health care for our families, and also, I mean, it's just so many things we have to address, like climate change, but I think the one big thing, if we overturn Citizens United, get the money out of politics to stop the billionaire agenda, and as far as instead of having billionaires put their money into politics, invest in public education, invest in public institutions, invest in in a public healthcare system, invest in jobs for our community. So that's some of the things I would like to see in a Project 2029.
I'm going to build on that to talk a little more specifically about education. And I know we're talking about offense and not defense, but just to help us think about what is Project 2025 in order to think about Project 2029, what Project 2025 is doing is explicitly turning government against the people, right? And it's kind of weaponizing government incompetence to be cruel toward people. And so some of the things that looks like is ending Head Start, ending school meals, ending Title I funding, codifying censorship and book bans, reducing funding for students with disabilities, rescinding protections for many different groups of students, school vouchers, school privatization. My mom's here from Texas. Shout out to my mom, where the horrible governor and legislature have just passed a massive school voucher program. Yeah, she says it's real bad. So when I think about Project 2029, specifically in the field of education, I think that the first thing is that Project 2029 has to start with orderly, responsible, participatory, functional government. And what that looks like in schools is that we're protecting the rights of all students, we're providing a high-quality education to every kid every day, and we're cultivating participation and equitable democracy in the way that we run our schools. And so then, from there, I started to kind of really dream, and I was like, okay, well, what would it really look like actually provide a high-quality education to every kid every day? And sort of the federal changes that I would want to see. And there's some really obvious things, like the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, has never been fully funded. Our special education system has never gotten the resources it needs to actually serve students with disabilities. Universal school meals is another really obvious one. And then another one that's a little less obvious, and again, it's a little bit defensive because it's about restoring something, but one of the things that Project 2025 is attacking are all of our systems for collecting and analyzing data about what's happening in our schools. So I think many of us know that in order to identify and solve problems in our schools, we need to have good, reliable data. So that's actually just another piece that I would name that is essential to restore.
So I guess I'm a little bothered to begin with. You said we were kind of caught flat-footed. And we shouldn't have been, y'all. Like I said when I started, it was never intended to do what we're trying to do. We have to have ethnic studies because our schools are not places that are teaching the histories, the diverse histories and different perspectives of what happened in that history. We have to have AFAM departments because our public schools have not been places that make African American students, that make our students who are second language learners and other folks feel welcome and seen and heard. So I don't know, y'all. I think we got a little comfortable. We got comfortable and complacent. And that's why we were caught flat-footed, right? We were shocked because we thought we had done something, and we had, but we got comfortable in what we were doing. And so for me, Project 2029 would be all of those things. It would be creating and recreating schools, public schools that are truly about what we say we want them to be about. Not about what they're about in theory, not about what we like to say, oh, they're the heart of democracy. How are they the heart of democracy? We were not making sure that all our kids can think and read and speak. How are they the heart of democracy when we're not making sure our babies are in space where they feel like their voice matters, so that when they get out of schools, they actually feel okay to vote? They think that their vote matters, that they can run for office, that they can sit in Congress, that they can make laws and policies. It has the potential to be the heart of democracy, but let's not fool ourselves, y'all. There are some things about it that need to be dismantled, undone, and disrupted. And so as I think about 2029, well, let me back up. When I think about Project 2025, if y'all think they wrote that stuff overnight, like I said, it was never the intention. So as soon as we started doing some things, they're like, oh, no. So they've been having living room, kitchen meetings for probably a couple decades to put this together. They are trying to undo the very institutions, the institutions of higher learning and DEI and the things that they see are helping us make movement and get traction on things that we know should be and what's right. 2029 for me would be not just about the things we talked about, it would also be a chance for us to really, truly recreate and restructure and rebuild public education to be what it can be and what it has not been so far for too many kids. It would be making sure that we actually rethink the structure itself. It's kind of artificial, y'all. And I'm the whole superintendent, right? The structure itself, the way we even do school, should have been dismantled a long time ago for a whole lot of reasons, political reasons, social reasons, humanizing reasons. And so I just want us to not get like, oh, well, one, shame on us for being flat-footed, being caught flat-footed. I never heard that term before, by the way, but I figured out what it meant. But shame on us. So first, let's not get caught flat-footed again. Stay woke, right? We knew that this was going to be the thing. And now, yes, we have folks who are in fancy offices with big titles who are saying it loudly, but they've been saying it the whole time. It was never the intention. And so I want to rethink 2029, but I don't want us to start from scratch. Like, we have been thinking about this stuff for a long, long time. I've been trying to figure out how to dismantle this stuff for a long, long time. You probably have been too. These are the conversations that we have as equity warriors, as transformational leaders, as folks who think that education is social justice. So you took notes, I took notes. We know what we need to do. Let's get together in a room. Let's write it all down like they did in the kitchen. And that's Project 2029. But here's the thing. We can't have a quick conversation and write it down and then stop. Because if we learn nothing from them, we learn about persistence. We learn about perseverance. We learn about don't tell all your secrets. Be quiet. Keep doing the work, right? And that's how you get the job done. So this cannot be the only panel. This cannot be the only conversation. And once we write down the project on a piece of paper, let's not forget it. And let's not ever again get comfortable and forget that what we're trying to do is not what everybody's trying to do. Thank you.
I just want to share, like, I've felt like I've been working ever since I came to consciousness to be on offense. I've seen time and time again initiatives trying to fund education and take away from corporations that have record-gaining profits fail at the state level. We talk about funding. Well, California gets our funding through taxing billionaires. And so if the stock market is down and billionaires are down, so is public education. We need to transform our structure of how we even get money for education in the first place. We talk about ethnic studies. The offense was getting ethnic studies, and I was part of some of those efforts. And now we have passed the law, we shall take it, but a law is just a cute words if there's no money behind implementing the law, which is the big issue at ethnic studies at the state level. So I'm very privileged in Berkeley, like I mentioned, and I'm really blessed to be around inspiring educators who are also thinking, what about those school boards who are trying to fight tooth and nail against ethnic studies? What about those people in Sacramento, in our legislature, who are trying to strangle ethnic studies, to limit ethnic studies? There's bills right now trying to prevent ethnic studies from being what it's intended to do. And if those pass, and then we fund ethnic studies, what it was all for? Because we're not transforming anything. And so there's real bills right now, forgetting the number, trying to actually address it. At the same time, there are bills out there trying to get pregnancy leave for our educators, because right now I couldn't afford it. I'm getting married at the end of the year, and we don't even talk about children. I'm 32. I can't afford a child. I had a surgery last year. All my sick leave is gone. I actually owe sick leave every year to the sick bank because I have very little sick leave. I get sick and I can't have a child. I don't have time. I have money to have a child. So offense, there are bills right now trying to get, and that wouldn't affect me. It's pregnancy leave, which is great, important. Not parental leave. We're trying to expand it all educators, but there's a bill for that. There's a bill trying to fund ethics studies, and there's a bill trying to strangle ethics studies. And that's just short term, but we really need to transform, not just structurally with resources, but also with our time. And I really appreciate other panelists talk about it, but and I call it the pretending of education. There's a lot of laws we got to follow to play this game of pretending, but like 1, 2, 3 lunch, which is the shortest time of the day. 4, 5, 6 leave, and now kids got jobs, they got sports, they're busier than me, and I feel like I work all the time just to even pay my rent. So, because you don't know a teacher that doesn't just teach. Like, come on now, that teacher's got at least 20 million different things just to afford it. Anyways, so when I think about offense, I think of all those different things. There's been bills, there's been initiatives, and we really need to transform the structure of how we're actually funding this, because if we don't do it, we're just going to keep strangling ourselves till there's none of us left in schools, and there's vacancies everywhere. So that's what I think.
I do a time check. I'm gonna keep mine real brief, and that's very rare. But apparently anything is possible. So I'm just gonna dream if I had like a wish list for 2020. I'm not gonna talk about how we're gonna do it, but this is my wish list. We'll start with free college and loan and debt forgiveness. We got plenty of folks out there who want to go back to school, but they got debt from undergrad, right? I'm gonna talk about increased mental health services for our students within the educational systems at all levels, 100%. And I got to channel one of my sons just last night. He says, he literally asked me, he said, "Dad, what are you yapping about tomorrow night?" And I said, I don't know, whatever comes to my head, but here's kind of the layout of what we're talking about. And he started going in, right before he went to bed, he started going in on all the things that he feels are wrong going on right now. And I got to channel him. I know we're talking about education here, but he said, y'all did a terrible job of taking care of our planet, Dad. And I said, you know what, you're absolutely right, but you could do something about that too, and so can we. So I got to channel my son Dama and shout that out. But those are three areas that I'm gonna put on my wish list. Oh, and I got to channel my brother from another one of the most brilliant people I know, Professor Colin Nahardo from Ethnic Studies, and he says universal ethnic studies absolutely, and particularly taught by experts in the field.
Very brief, going last after all of these amazing individuals. This moment we're in is very painful. The dismantling can feel extremely vicious and violent. And as our superintendent said, it can also be an opportunity for the freedom dreaming. And some of the things that I freedom dream specifically around education are learning spaces that are truly humanizing, where our students of color, particularly African American, our Black and brown students, are deeply centered and honored, our families are honored, and there are things such as play, connection to nature, and all of these humanizing practices in our learning spaces and accessible to our children and families.
Tried to capture some of this: play, humanizing learning spaces, mental health, debt forgiveness, free college, maintaining ethnic studies, transforming public education, IDEA, universal school meals, citizens, overturning Citizens United, functional government, universal healthcare. I appreciate to use your words, and Bettina loves this idea of freedom dreaming. To do our best work, I believe that we need cover. For that Black prophet, Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, in some ways it was spiritual, right? He said, and he's allowed me to go to the mountaintop. In my day-to-day work as a faculty member at UC Berkeley, cover is Chancellor Lyons and the UC Board of Regents, their commitment to free speech and academic freedom. So here's my question to each of you. What do you need in this moment? Or who do you need, rather, in this moment? Maybe who and what. But who do you need in this moment to provide you with cover to do your best work in terms of defending public education?
I can start. We need you. We need our community. You are our cover. This is the time to be vocal about your support for ethnic studies, to speak out, to keep speaking out, to please let our school board directors know, our district leadership know that you support this kind of education, especially during this time. We need community care, we need your love, we need your courage, and we need the good vibes. We need you.
Hello. The first thing that came to my mind when I read this question is that it's my job to provide cover for these wonderful people on this panel as a school board member.
I'll go. Is this our call to action here? Oh, no, this is not a call to action. That's going to cover. It's the same thing to me. So cover, I'll start at the home front. I need my wife and my kids to be like, Daddy, you can go out on a Saturday night and be in community with these folks who are trying to build our education in the right way. I'll say, easy to point to the leadership on my campus and Chancellor in our district in terms of leaning on us as experts. We know what the students need, or feel that we know what the students need, to keep listening and keep providing so we can keep doing what we're doing. And I want to chime in too, the community, again, this work cannot be done in isolation, so we need everybody in this room and beyond to come together and support, because then the weight doesn't fall upon us or fall upon you, it falls upon all of us. So collaborative spirit, once again.
The cover is us. We're like our power is through collective strength. So we need to be united, and then also what we're building here today in this space, we cannot keep it in this space. We need to go out, talk to our neighbors, talk to people we know, listen. We need to, next time we have a forum, we need to be able to have more people in this space, bring in youth into this space, and also, just the need to have, folks stand up not only as allies, but co-conspirators. And it's interesting when we talk about DEI or the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and attacks against that, and what Jen said about government, like weaponizing government, the incompetence of government. But it's interesting that now, without having diversity in our government, we're seeing the real incompetence now. So like we need for, I can speak out about it. I sure know that Black women can speak out about it, but we need also for our white comrades in the movement to call this out forcefully. That's also is needed critically in this time, as far as white voices speaking loudly about the importance of ethnic studies in our schools.
I don't know what I can say more than what the folks have already said. Definitely need my board as cover, because the board has an important role in terms of setting policy, in terms of approving our budget, and we put our money where we believe in things that we value, so they approve our budget. And otherwise, just need my board to be able to speak and share the things that are happening in Berkeley, and counter narratives that try to say things about Berkeley that may not be true. I need my educators, because when I go and speak, I speak on behalf of them and what they do. And so I need to be in community with them, but also make sure they are actually moving with integrity, and that they are really trying to realize the values of Berkeley, and truly believe that every student deserves excellence and enrichment and engagement, and needs to have access to equitable learning environments. So I need them. They're not cover, but in many ways they are. So when I was in Capitol Hill, I was able to say what was happening in our classrooms because of what my teachers were doing. And when they were telling me my teachers were doing things other than that, right, I was able to kind of lean back and say, no, they're not. Must be another school district down the way. I need community, and I need community for all the reasons that folks just said, but I also need community because what folks don't know is that the federal government can't tell us what to teach. It's very much local. And so when I was sitting again in DC, I got to say, these are Berkeley values, and this is what the people of Berkeley want, and these are the things that reflect Berkeley. And so we need to be in community so that we can continue to make sure that what we are doing in BUSD is truly reflective of who we want to be as Berkeley. The covering of my ancestors all day, y'all. I'm not gonna get spiritual on y'all, but I recognize that I am a part of a legacy. And I know that they were braver than me and smarter than me and stronger than me and only got so far. And that we have a long ways to go. So every day when I get up, I gotta pray and ask for the anointing and for their covering. So I'm gonna just be real with y'all. I ask for that every day. And I probably need that more than I need all the other coverings that I just talked about. Because in the work that I do, the reality is that right now I'm in Berkeley, lucky me. But I might be somewhere else, right? And who I am and why I do what I do and how I do what I do is gonna be what it is, regardless of where I go. And to the point that that was just made in terms of boards changing, et cetera, I need to be strong and fortified and convicted by myself, whether or not I have any physical or visible or obvious cover. And so that's why I just let you know, my ancestors matter to me. And then the babies themselves. The babies are probably the most important cover. Before I went to Congress, I met with a number of students, but I met with a student who actually now he's a freshman at UC Berkeley. He was the president of the Jewish Student Union. And we had a whole lunch together. He was so happy to get out of class. And we were just talking. I was like, this is. He was like, yeah, I know. I said, this is a lot. I was like, is this your experience? We did the whole thing. And then he said, you know what? He was like, don't worry about them. He said, they don't really care about what's going on. He said, this is just a performance. He says, you go out there. He says, you be yourself. He says, you smile, and you represent Berkeley values. That baby saying that to me was, a whole bunch of y'all said a whole bunch of great things. I got cards and flowers and go Enikia. But when that baby said that to me, I was like, I'm good. I'm about to go rep Berkeley values. So I need the coverings of the babies themselves to remind me of what I do and why I do it. And with the ancestors and the babies, I'm good.
I just want to, I'm in a book club with a few of my closest friends, and we're reading Black Reconstruction, and I'm reminded of the people, our ancestors who came before us, and teaching the abolitionist movement, learning about people of all stripes, sacrificing their lives, their social status, their jobs, everything, just to help a random stranger get to the next place on their way to freedom, trying to be able to vote, reporting on lynchings. I was teaching IDB Wells a few days ago, and it reminds me that as hard as it is, we're so privileged. We can speak out, we can say things. For me, having citizenship, we know what ICE is doing, but there's less fear for me. And so at the end of the day, what is our excuse? If we are not taking action, we are not organizing, we are not putting our body in the line, taking direct action, because there's been worse conditions. There's been worse. And Trump is just another, he's got his own ancestors trying to do this as well. And so we need, and there's been generations, I feel like been more like that, the sacrifice has been, compared to back then, really not that much. And so really, we need to really be able to put our lives, our bodies, our job, everything on the line, because we are seeing the proliferation of these attacks. And so at the end of the day, I'm very privileged that I do have a covering. I thank you for my leadership. I joke and call it the dark side sometimes because I'm in the classroom day in, day out with these kids, but they do an important work because I can't do my job if I don't have cover. I'd rather not worry about, am I gonna have the same salary next year? Am I gonna be able to just teach basic things? And so that's a privilege, and I'm thankful for the cover of leadership, and we need more of that. If you have leadership, make sure you are proactively taking that cover. We need people in these positions to really make sure they're speaking out, and the people who can support them, and the people on the ground also, again, with the people power, anything is possible, and we really need to unite. It's about time. Thank you.
Many of your responses around cover, I think the idea of we the people just kept on coming up. We're gonna move now to Q&A. So the invitation is not to make a statement. The invitation is to succinctly ask you a question. And if it appears as if you're gearing up to make a statement, I'm going to lovingly redirect you to ask your question in service of giving everyone space, as many people as possible space to ask a question, okay? All right, so Michael will roam, he has the mic. What succinctly worded questions do you have for our panelists?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. I'm from Oakland, and I've been an activist around education issues for a very long time, and I also taught at the adult school in Oakland. I raised my son in the Oakland public schools, and I'm a member of Educators for Democratic Schools when we fought for public education against the charter school movement, and there was a law passed that made it a little more difficult for school districts to just invite charters in to the detriment of public schools. My question has to do with the state. So on the question of cover, I didn't hear any of you say that the state of California, which the governor keeps reminding us is the 4th largest economy in the world, should be on our side fighting for public education and funding things that maybe the federal government is going to fail to fund. And I was just wondering what you all think about mobilizing around state issues. It was said that there's some bills attacking ethnic studies and there's some bills defending it. Well, we need to mobilize the state to defend ethnic studies, and we need to demand that the good bills be passed. So again, what do you think is the role of the state government in this struggle? Thank you.
So again, as many panelists have said, I also feel very lucky to be in this district and in this community, and particularly to be a parent in this community and able to organize with fellow parents and caregivers. And there's a group called Berkeley Families for Collective Liberation, and they have been organizing at the state level to mobilize against AB 1468, which I believe Spencer was referencing. So that is an opportunity for community members to get involved and engage our state in being the cover that they are supposed to be for our schools and communities.
I guess I just I want to add to that there are lots of very positive things happening at the state level that are protecting us. I can't remember the number of the bill, but there is and I don't even know whether it's passed yet or not. I'm not prepared to answer this question very well, but I'm gonna tell you anyway that there's a bill that the State Department of Education is either has or is fast tracking through the legislature to counteract the federal government's declaration that schools are no longer sensitive spaces for immigration enforcement, and to create a statewide law saying that schools are sanctuary spaces, and in fact creating a safe zone around schools for some, like 100 yards or something around schools, that is also a sanctuary space. So this is just another example of work that is happening at the state level that is super important and very protective of us and our schools.
I think Spencer, did you want to?
My question is, last year, Berkeley Unified withstood many attacks. Some came internally, but were very much fortified at the national level of allegations of anti-Semitism, because there were teachers among the district that were willing to talk about Palestine. And I want to, showing your testimony in Congress, Superintendent Ford Morthel, versus the Columbia president at the time, my seniors got to really see the difference between an official who answers to a publicly elected board versus one that relies on private funds to exist. And I'm curious, now that we can see how the allegations of anti-Semitism has been weaponized to increase fascist tendencies in this country, what would you say, those of you who are deeply involved in that process of defense here, have you learned, and how do you think Berkeley can be a leader around the country? Because I think it's also important to mention that AB 1468, the major attacks to ethnic studies being an upheld and funded initiative in the state is also rooted in claims of anti-Semitism. So what can Berkeley, how can we continue to lead with Berkeley values statewide and nationwide, particularly around that issue, as we see it's been so weaponized to the detriment of all?
So we need to keep telling our stories. We need to keep telling our true stories of what is actually happening in our classrooms and in our schools. And again, just invoking what I was sharing earlier around courage and love. We have some really incredible educators who have taken the brave step of being inclusive of Palestine, acknowledging that Palestine exists. And we need to share those stories as parents and caregivers, as colleagues, that this does not harm our students, that these are the kinds of stories and histories that deserve to be included in our classrooms and talked about and read about and discussed with care, with skill, with support. So I think just continuing to speak about what is actually happening is so important. Talking about what ethnic studies actually is so important. And also thanking your teachers when they take these courageous steps. Showing that love, showing that community care is also so important too.
Just want to briefly touch on, let's say that bill does pass and you can't talk about anything outside of AFAM, Asian American, Latina, and Native American studies. You can't talk about Islam or other global events. You got to keep it narrow. We could get creative. Black Panther Party, what did they do? They talked about Palestine all day long. We can talk about the movement to divest from South Africa. We can talk about what Nelson Mandela. But there's history rooted in African American, rooted in all these histories that are inherently, we're all interconnected. And I think that's the core of ethnic studies, that we're all interconnected. All these liberation struggles are part of the same human rights struggle at the end of the day. And also, when we talk about that, we also haven't talked about, like, I'm really blessed to have a partnership with the AFAM Studies Department. We brought two amazing scholars talking about Black communist women's writings. And what does that mean to have a different economic structure? I feel like we talk a lot about anti-racism in schools, but we don't actually talk about anti-capitalist tendencies, especially when we're always like, I'm always like, work, 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 and I'm like, dang, I'm just reproducing the same logics of capitalism that works ourselves to death. Instead, I should say, live, thrive, and reading should be a pleasure. And that's a whole other conversation with the students, but at the end of the day, I can get creative to talk about things that we know have consequences at the end of the day, have financial, have legal consequences. And we could talk about these things in a way that still is creative, that fights against the people resisting us.
And I think we can trust the brilliance of our kids, right? If you offer them information and offer them the opportunity to make connections and draw comparisons, we've got a lot of really brilliant kids who are gonna pick that up and take it.
Thinking about that, it also requires us to tell the story about our pedagogical approach. So ethnic studies and AFAM studies is not just about the what that you teach. What makes those classes special is the how that instruction is facilitated. Is this how, to your point, the babies, I call them babies, the students are centered. It's the how the teacher is the facilitator and not the giver of knowledge, right? How we ask questions and encourage our students to ask questions. How we make sure that we are presenting multiple perspectives and even bringing in their perspectives and letting them challenge the perspective. So I think one of the reasons why there was so much fear, there's many reasons why there was so much fear, but one of the reasons why was because it was this idea that you were just giving. You were saying this is what it is, and that is not actually how our ethnic studies lessons or many of our classes are facilitated, ethnic studies or otherwise. We really are needing to do a better job of telling the story about how we teach and how we engage our students. They are not blank slates, to your point of they're brilliant. But if folks think that we're just giving and feeding them and forcing it down their throats, then they won't trust, right? You ain't gotta trust me, here's our pedagogy, and this is what we do. And again, ask the babies about it. And then folks, I think, the fear will be there for other reasons. We talked about that earlier, question number one. But I think that was a lot of it. So I wanna give some grace to those folks who were anxious and afraid, because I think they were uninformed about how we actually facilitate that and misunderstand that ethnic studies is just about teaching about Black folks and brown folks. And it is, that's a part of it, that's a big part. But it's really about centering those experiences in a way that is unique to those particular courses that we should tell more about and talk more about and share.
And to your point earlier, part of why people can't imagine what those classes might look like is that people don't have the capacity to imagine schools looking different than the schools that many of us were raised in. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed all of this. Thank you for all of your comments. My question is, I think that there's a lot, I loved hearing you talk about stories. I think there's a lot of ways that we continue to echo the talking points that are harmful. And so one of those is we talk about like financial mismanagement or disenfranchisement when we know it's underinvestment in our schools. And so I'm curious, what are the other stories that you think we are repeating to the detriment of our public schools and the teaching and the fight that we're all trying to engage in that you would like to invite us to have new language around to help with the fight?
That's a great question. So, well, I've heard people say that in some, in some small way, what we're seeing, is a response to our own doing. So, some of my very energetic Berkeley undergrads would say we need to burn the system down, right? And what we're seeing is burning the system down. And so I think what you're inviting us to do is, because I do think that some of our own language, right, it's embedded in probably Project 2025, right, that the system is broke, that government is the problem, it's too big, and so I think you're inviting us to think about new language that is agentic, that helps us think about something new rather than seeing deficits, but more assets.
Sorry, yes, and also, right, when you were talking about have I stumped us all? but right, what is this new vision? What is the language that we can start to repeat? As opposed to saying, yes, our schools are broken, but we instead say our schools are agents and engines that are helping to drive us forward, and that's why we need to continue to do this, right? Like, what is that action dreaming that we're doing? What is that freedom dreaming language that we can take from this moment and repeat forward?
I think we start with uplifting the brilliance of our kids consistently, constantly. That's my first offering.
I think I might be answering your question, and I apologize if I'm not. I think one of the stories I really want to interrupt is that ethnic studies promotes hate amongst groups. That is absolutely an untrue story. I like to say that ethnic studies is a love story, and I believe it's one of the greatest love stories in our country's history because it still stands as the longest student strike in the United States. It was 5 months. You don't strike for 5 months because you hate. You strike for 5 months because you love deeply. So I really want to end that story that ethnic studies divides us and promotes fear and hate and discord, because it is absolutely the opposite.
All right. Does anyone else want to address that? All right. Another question?
Thank you. First of all, thank all of you. Some great stuff tonight. But I'm concerned about the question that Professor Bristol put out about looking forward. And I heard a lot of good stuff, but a lot of platitudes. Superintendent for Morthel, I really like what you did say, though, about this is not a one-off. We've got to continue. And my question then is, what all of you know about the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, and how it organized a national movement for workers' rights with no cell phones, no emails, no laptops, no nothing? And so when we start blaming and looking at all these very real obstacles in the way, we lose sight of the fact that people have done far more with much, much less. And so what have all you learned, and how will you then use that information moving forward?
I wonder if the technology isn't an obstacle increasingly rather than an opportunity to organize, but I'll offer that.
Well, just to, just to address with the technology is not a substitution for organizing. It's about having those conversations and building the relationships, and that's why educators are in a unique position as workers because you educators are educating young students. Young students, they have parents and families and looking at the school as a community hub, that's a place ripe for organizing, and that's why the institution of public schools is looked at by the ruling class as a dangerous place. So there is power in building those relationships, having the conversations, and hearing and listening to what do our families want, what do our students want. When we talk about re-envisioning public education, what do our students want? Listening to our students and creating a movement together to bring that forward.
And then what do we do with that information? If it just goes in a conversation, right where we are now.
That's right.
I want to share that, and direct kind of ties into the previous conversation questions as well. As my first year teaching, my goal, my main goal, what I held at the core is I want to be a classroom that students want to go to, because school is not a place many of the students I teach want to be at. And so how do we, again, bring this to be this thing we're reading, a source of pleasure? And then how do we then turn that into our sites of organizing as well? I think something the right wing has done really well is make us think that we are trying to weaponize language to silence them so you can't actually talk and have discussion and debate, when that can be far from the truth. But then how do we make it so our spaces of organizing are thriving? I'm looking forward to engaging with my colleagues about this issue and that we're in community about it. Or how do I engage in a hard conversation where I actually am really upset that you said that or that you did that, and then but we still have the same goal in mind. And then how do we create for me as an educator, enough capacity in my life to think about organizing when I'm worried about paying rent to begin with. And so all these different things I'm thinking about in terms of lessons or language, it has to go back to, for me, loving one another, being in community, and what does that mean for me in terms of how I spend my time, how I build relationships, how I spend the time to even address harm that's been committed amongst my organizing comrades, et cetera. And then just real quick back to the technology thing, that is absolute detriment. Technology is definitely inhibiting our intellectual development. Just go to our classrooms, and then if you don't have a phone pouch, then it's really difficult to actually engage. And so that has absolutely stunted our growth. Even like I'm still huge, I'm a technology teacher leader, but I've been putting out more and more readings and handwriting more and more because we are losing these basic skills, and that is the most important to educational development. And also in terms of language as well, I think at the end of the day, teachers as a political body are really powerful. People just trust teachers, and I think we go back to teachers know best, we know our students best, and really engage the families as well. I think there's always Moms for Lydia and these types of organizations that are being no, we're the community. It's no, let's actually figure out how we can truly engage our community. As a teacher, that means how do I proactively tell a parent that this kid is actually just cutting class half the time, and they don't just wait for a report card to hear about that. So these are just little teacher things, little organizing things, and community building things that makes me think about in terms of labor, in terms of language, all those things.
Because I heard Teacher Sam say, and then what do you do with the information? I think what we do with the information is then create a plan and be really strategic, meaning I'm gonna be the superintendent because I know that as a superintendent, I influence X, Y, Z, and then Jen says, I'm gonna run for the board because I know in the board I make policy, and then Spencer says, well, I'm gonna run for office because I know in office I get to make the policy that sets the policy that informs the policy that happens at the school board. And then someone else says, and I'm gonna be a teacher because I'm a professor too at the university because I teach teachers. So I'm I need to make sure the folks who are in front of the kids are actually doing the things and facilitate the kind of instruction we know is good and empowering, et cetera. So I'm going to be a professor at the university for teachers too. And then someone else says, we got to be like really strategic. We can't just talk about it and stop. We have to talk about it and then like, now what's the plan? And be ready for everyone to play a different role in the plan and know where all the pieces go, and then actually have patience and wait for it to seed and water it and grow. Because I think we grow weary way fast, y'all. And again, if you go back to Project 2025, they was talking about this for a long, this was a whole plan. That fancy document did not happen overnight, right? And they were patient and calm, and we was excited, thinking we was free and woke, and right? And they said, like, you just wait. Moms of Liberty, they had a whole strategy. We're gonna take over school boards. We're gonna take over school boards because who votes on and decides on the curriculum? Oh, that's the school board. So we need to be just as strategic. So we don't just listen, Teacher Sam, and then stop and keep talking about it. We listen and then design the plan and be ready for the plan to position us in different places, in the org, outside the org, in DC, in the universities, day-to-day, walking, knocking on doors, sharing information, because that is how change happens. That's how I think the Black Panthers did it. That's how I think a whole bunch of civil rights folks did it. I don't know about the AFL, but I'm gonna read about it tonight when I get home, right? And so I just wanted to just respond to that it's not just sit and talk and wait, it's sit and talk and act, but be ready to do something. Everybody has a role to play, and our roles will not look the same. And then come back and huddle and say, how we doing? And then go back and do that again.
I think we maybe have time for maybe one or two more questions.
I just want to jump in real quick. For the last like 15 years, whenever I'm in front of an audience on stage or up on a panel like this, I do an engagement check with the group, right, and see how many cell phones are out. And this group right here, y'all been amazing with keeping those phones in the pockets. So shout out to y'all, because it's very much confidence building for us up here when everybody's engaged and looking up here. So appreciate y'all.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm a student at UC Berkeley, and some of you have talked about how it was students at SF State that pushed for ethnic studies, and I look at the art above you and it's literally students protesting, and so we know how much power that students have. And I was wondering right now in this moment, what specifically can students do alongside you? And do you have a plan on how to include students when you move forward?
So, yeah, I'm a teacher. I want them to go to class. And I helped organize that protest when I was an undergrad at UC Berkeley as well, connecting BSU here from the BSU at Cal. I remember that moment very vividly. It was very inspirational for me to see high school and college students getting together for collective liberation. But I think, back to labor organizing, how did Oakland's teachers win their huge contract win? How did we get ethnic studies? At the end of the day, we need to take collective, direct action. Students ask me, what can we do all the time? I'm like, you gotta stop doing business as usual. You got to refuse to be complicit in the system. But that's a fever dream if we don't organize. And then the next step is then how do we start asking these questions? And then how do we build the skills to just even bring people together, have our voices heard, and find joy in that? I think it's the technology has disconnected from finding joy with each other and being in real community and taking time out of just being in a screen to actually be in front of people. And that takes energy, and who's actually holding that space. And we need to all identify as organizers, whatever. I'm a teacher, organizer, whatever you are. I'm an organizer, teacher, actually. We gotta be that first and foremost.
Had an ethnic studies advisory committee for the past 4 years, and we've been really intentional about having students on the committee. And even when we first launched the position that I'm filling currently, we did listening circles with students to ensure that middle school, high school students were giving input on the vision for what a rollout of TK-12 ethnic studies could look like. And we've continued to engage student voice and ensure that they're giving feedback on our pilot curriculum so that they continue to have a say on what they will be learning and their future peers will be learning as well around ethnic studies. But I think it's a great question. I think it's something we have been intentional about and need to continue to be intentional about. And I also wanna just shout out and name that there's many amazing student organizers here on this campus at Berkeley High who have continued to do that organizing work. And some of you all in the space are family, caregiver, community organizers who support them to do that work. So it really takes all of us coming together to make sure that our students continue to be engaged and have a voice.
I just want to build on that by saying that this is more speaking right now as a mom of an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, including a pretty fierce college student activist who I'm deeply proud of. I feel like this is a moment where intergenerational organizing is so important. College students are under such intense attack. My daughter is a really brave person, you guys, and she is scared, and her friends are scared. And I think it's especially on those of us with gray hair to be standing up for young people like you and standing alongside young people like you so that you're not on the front lines by yourself, because this is a really scary time for young people.
Want to jump in briefly. I love that question. It's a beautiful question. Students are absolutely have the strongest voice on any campus environment. That's true, and that's definitely what we want, the communication we want to relay with students. But that can only happen, I think it really starts with the rapport building with our students, not to assume anything, right? Build rapport with our students, because that leads to that trust. And we definitely cannot assume students are walking through our doors, whether it be our office or the classroom door, automatically trusting us off top because we're a professor or because we're a counselor, right? We're in community here. I don't necessarily just trust you off top. Like, we got to build that rapport, right, with one another. So I think that it all starts at the foundational level of really working with our students, building that rapport, building that trust, and letting them know, and then offering support and asking them, not assuming anything, but asking them, what do you need? What do you all want, right? And then how can we support you in that, right? And once they have that trust within you, they'll be like, okay, and you can support them and guide them through. Thank you for that question again.
Last question.
Yeah, hi. This is a question as both a parent and as someone who works at Berkeley High, and inspired by a comment that you made, Spencer. So this is sort of maybe a question to you in particular, but I'm curious, if other people have thoughts about it. But I just really feel like what I see is that hunger, the literal hunger, for food. I mean, kids come to me all the time for snacks, and I bring snacks, every week, and a lot of kids know that. And then also the hunger for connection, and how without addressing that hunger, we can't expect the learning to happen. And in the way that Ms. Ford, that you speak, so eloquently, like, I totally with you on that, and yet without the food. And so I guess I feel like Berkeley does such an amazing job, K-8, in providing breakfast and providing these amazing gardens that feed the schools and then inspire that great nutrition. But I'm just sort of curious in a really concrete way, ending with just, and also knowing that, like, the Black Panthers provided breakfast. Someone like Angela Davis talks about the role of self-care and how that has to be, primary, in struggle for justice. So I'm just curious with you, Spencer, like, what's your vision? Think about, I always take the opportunity to.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Let's let him.
Sure,
okay.
sure.
Sorry. Just because we're also running. Sure. Okay.
It goes back to the structure of our school day. There's no actual human centeredness in it. It's all maximize the amount of work you do right now. Because our school day, 8:30 to 11:41, you're in school. You get a cute 6 minutes in between classes. So hopefully you're not late going sprinting. I mean, you see this campus. Then you have 40 minutes to eat food. And that's where they crave that human connection with their peers. And then there's another 3 hours of just grind. And then after school, a myriad of things. We need to change our days. Our days are centered around work, and they're not centered around humanity. And we can do both. We can do both. But right now, we're only doing one, and we're not doing it well at all. In fact, it's wasting more of our time than gaining. If we took time out of our day to address nutrition. Like at my high school, we had a nutritional period, 20 minutes. I'm not saying that's going to transform schools, but that's us thinking about these are actually humans, and they need even more humanity, structural humanity, than adults do, because or else how are they? We're conditioning them at the end of the day. We need to condition them to be humans first and not workers, not just laborers trying to maximize our output, but humans maximizing our connections with one another. And until the school day changes, I don't know what we can do about that, honestly.
Can I invite you to congratulate or thank our panelists for this incredible conversation? And as Skylar mentioned, it's Saturday evening. Folks didn't have to be here. We want to thank you for coming, for beginning what we hope will be the first of many conversations in our work to not only defend public education, but to do some freedom dreaming in preparation for this upcoming election. Thank you.